You may not be able to do anything about your past, but your future has no reason to take you by surprise. I didn't choose the parents I was born to, the environment I was born in, all of that. But now I can be intentional about those things. Once we are able to identify how these dispositions are formed, we can then use that formula to form a mindset that puts us in the right position. Organizations tend to not prioritize how the people communicate or the interactions that go on with the people and how that ultimately impacts on the results that our organization has. So I'll give you an example. Whilst people drive profits, emotions drive people to drive profits. Emotions impact on buying decisions or even your customers. But I'm saying the people within the organization, emotions drive them. If people are motivated, if they feel great, they will do great. People intimidate others in order to be able to lead them or leverage on the position to lead. You don't necessarily have to have a position to lead. You need to have influence in order to lead, and in order to have influence, you need to have impact, because impact is the seed that you have on that you sow to reap the harvest of influence on people. We have people in leadership positions, and it doesn't necessarily mean we have leaders in those positions. So you can have a position, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a leader. So we can say you are the CEO, we can say you are the divisional head, but the title is not the proof of leadership. The proof of leadership is followership, that people willingly follow, right? That I don't have to coerce them, I don't have to force them, I don't have to tell you, I am your boss. Don't you know I'm your leader? For me to tell you that, then I'm depending on the title, meaning that if I don't have that title, then I don't have that influence. If people had a choice as to who will be their leader, and there was absolutely no consequence to whatever choice they made, the question is, would they choose you as their current leader? Failure is part of the process of life, and I think the meaning we attach to a thing determines what that thing is. A lot of people attach so much of a negative connotation to failure. Life is in cycles. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. In the moments when you are down, do you consider yourself down and out? Or do you consider that this is an opportunity for you to acquire a skill, right? To learn something new, to evolve. There can be no up if there's no down. We live in a polarized world. So appreciating polarity and the gradient, the differential that it brings to make life experiential, I think that's very significant. There is nothing that you need or will ever need that has not been provided for. You just need to align with what has been provided for. And aligning is belief. So I can say I believe for, a Rolls Royce, for instance. Those are my words. That's my mouth saying that. The real question is the status of your heart. And the measure of how aligned your heart is with what you are stating or professing with your mouth is how it reacts in the face of opposition. Can detest the practice of meditation. I don't like it. You can choose to not believe in the sun. Say, I don't believe in the sun. I don't believe in his heat. You will still be subject to the sun. Why do I say this? You cannot not meditate. We all do it. But a lot of times, most people do it for what they do not want. Worrying is meditation. It's meditating on what you do not want. I've not seen people that are in worry and you walk past them and they don't see you. You have to go and then they come back. You think they were here? They were meditating on a life that they do not want. If we're not deliberate and intentional about shifting the mindsets of the collective and of the whole, people will remain in captivity.
Welcome to another episode of Selahmeditate, where we engage on transformative conversations with thought leaders and entrepreneurs. I remain your host, Benzik. Today, we have with us a very renowned guest, a management consultant, a performance coach, and the founder of Live Your Dreams Africa Foundation, with years of experience in transforming lives and helping companies achieve peak performance. Today, he's here with us to have deep conversation on mindsets, business, spirituality, and the whole round self-development. But before I bring in, as we often do for our first-time guests, I'm just going to take a brief moment to read his brief profile. Bankole Williams is a renowned consultant and peak performance coach with over 17 years of experience in human resources and consulting. He has a proven track record of helping organizations improve their performance, enabling them to surpass financial targets. He is a member of the Forbes Coaching Council and a recipient of the Silverbird 100 Most Distinguished CEOs in Nigeria in 2014. His firm, LYD Consulting, was awarded Best in Corporate Consulting in Southwest Nigeria in 2023. Williams has also been recognized as one of the top 10 leadership coaches in Nigeria. As a social reformer, Bankole is dedicated to addressing unemployment and underemployment through his foundation, Live Your Dreams Africa Foundation, which has empowered over 28,000 youths and created over 6,000 jobs in Lagos in 2019. His foundation is a current recipient of the Not-for-Profit of the Year Award 2024, given by the Shiraz Africa Awards. The foundation received the Google.org Award for Youth Empowerment in Africa in 2019. Williams holds certificates in neurolinguistic programming, life and career coaching, and management consulting, and is widely regarded as a behavioral change expert. He is a founder and principal consultant at the LYD Consulting, where he delivers transformational training and consulting interventions to various organizations, including top banks, state governments, and international entities like Google.org and the World Bank. Bankole has designed and facilitated programs on leadership, emotional intelligence, business communication, and more, helping organizations achieve sustainable growth and change. So guys, if it's the first time of coming to this channel, we'll do our best to bring you highly incredible guests like this. So if you valued what we do here, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this video with those whom this is going to benefit. So make welcome my highly remarkable guest here, Bankole Williams. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You have a very, very intimidating profile. I want to know this journey. How did it start for you into management consulting?
Okay, so that's a pretty interesting question.
Yeah.
So it takes me back to my third year in the University of Lagos.
Okay.
I wanted to study medicine, but they gave me biochemistry because I had absolutely no interest in it, right? I say this thing about the average person who studied science, maybe apart from computer science, that they were all medicine wannabes. So I wanted to study medicine, but hey, I got biochemistry. A course I had no interest in. I did what I call CPF, cram, pour, forget. I finished it 2-1, but I don't remember jack squat about what I learned. We had all those cycles and everything. I crammed those things to point an exam.
Pour it and then forget it.
Exactly, right? And I had an experience, very symbolic experience in my third year where a gentleman by the name Fela Dorotoye came to speak on the secrets of academic excellence in school, right? I remember seated in that auditorium, I was so enthralled by this guy. I was like, wow, what manner of wisdom. But I think beyond that was, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was watching somebody living a picture of my future.
Wow.
Right? It's like the baby on the inside of me leapt. You know that Mary and Elizabeth experience, that kind of thing where you see somebody doing something so well,
you so desire.
That you so desire. And I felt like this was it. So I became very curious about him. I started asking questions. What does this guy do? Whatever it is that he's doing, I think that's
something
that I'd like to do. Interestingly, a number of people don't know this. Back in school, I used to be part of a very popular rap group. I used to do a bit of music.
Rap.
Not a bit, a lot of music back then. The group is called Rooftop MCs. Right?
Rooftop
MCs.
MCs.
It's a gospel music group. You probably have heard the song Ori Mi Wu Elagimo.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was that group.
Wow.
Right. There were 4 of us, and 2 of us left the group. Right. And after we left, they blew.
You guys left, they blew up. You can imagine.
Yeah, but it was just after we left that they released an album and all. Right. But the point is, at the time, that wasn't worth it for me. My music wasn't worth it for me because there were certain risks that the 2 existing guys took that we couldn't, right? I won't go into too much detail, right? But the point is, I was doing that, but I wasn't willing to risk it all for music. And then I saw somebody who came to speak, and I felt I could risk it all for that.
Wow.
Right. So I became curious. I said, I need to know what this guy is doing. So I started asking questions. What does this guy do? and I heard he was a consultant. And I said, that's what I'm going to do with my life. And it was interesting because I started, in my final year, then we had the consulting firms that would come, to organize tests for final year students and everything. I remember doing one of those tests and I didn't pass. So they said, I believed I did, but I wanted to be a consultant. But hey, you go to school, study any course, come out and you get any job. So I did my NYSC. And during my NYSC, I got a job in a bank, right? So I ended up in banking for a period. I worked in banking for some time, and for the first time in my career in banking, in one of our appraisals, for the first time I wasn't promoted, right? And I got an A-star rating, so that was like the highest rating, but I wasn't promoted. So I remember walking up to my boss to ask her, why didn't you promote me? And she said the same words every time I went. She said, I just want you to know that you don't get it every year, right? And sometimes that's a tough thing to take when you do not know the reason. But the truth is, really, that's life sometimes. There are things you want and sometimes you just don't get it. There are things that everybody has been in that situation where they desired something and it didn't come. Right, so yeah, it happens in life. And I remember walking out of her office and thinking to myself, I imagine how it must feel to be in her shoes, to be able to make such a decision. And the minute I thought the thought, I noticed that my heart resisted the suggestion of it. Right, like, no, I don't want to be her. Now, that was a bit confusing for me because if I continued on my career trajectory, I would one day be her. I would one day become the head of human resources in a bank. So I paid attention to my heart. Why was there such a resistance to the thought? And it was in that moment it occurred to me that I probably was climbing a ladder that may have been placed on the wrong wall. Right, so I then began to remember my experience in the third year in university. I began to remember that I wanted to be a consultant, and interestingly, by virtue of what I was doing in human resources, it gave me the opportunity to be interfacing with consultants. So, I began to feel like, hey, this thing was tugging at me to explore this thing that I'd once desired. So I started to pray about it, to, just see God's face. If this situation where I desired a promotion and it didn't happen was happening for a reason to probably allow the scales to fall off my eyes, to see that there was much more for me, for my life than what, being a banker could afford me at the time. And I began to pray about it, and I felt very convicted in my heart that, it was a time to make that transition into consulting. And guess what? I ended up working with that amazing gentleman called Selahmeditate. Right. So that was really, what led to me ultimately, setting up my own consulting firm.
Oh, okay. So what can you describe as the most life transforming moment for you?
In the journey of becoming a consultant.
Yes, in the journey.
So I'd say one was that moment in my third year, right? Because that was a tipping point where I began to realize what life held for me. What I was passionate about. Another one was, I recall a time when I was still a banker. Very unusual of my boss, and some experiences happen in life that you almost can't explain. It's a one-off, but in that one-off, it's like time and chance just collides in your favor. So something unusual happened. Unusual being that my boss at the time usually was the one who would always go to, we had a learning academy in the bank. he would always go there to see how the learning sessions were going on, take feedback from the participants and everything. And for the first time, he didn't go, and he told me to go, right, to go see what was happening. So, and I could, because it wasn't within my job description, for lack of a better way to put it. So I could have decided to be offended about it, but I went. And when I got there, it was break time. So the participants had just come out of class, right? And they walked up to me and they were like, man, this training we've been on has been so incredible, right? It's been life transforming. People were sharing amazing testimonies of how what the facilitator had shared had given them some level of insight and clarity, all that. And right there in that moment, I felt again, somebody's living a picture of my future. I felt like this is the kind of feedback that people should be giving about me, right? And I think everybody experiences that in life, where you see somebody doing something and you feel like this should be me, right?
That's true.
So I remember receiving all that feedback, and I was like, I need to meet this facilitator. So I walked up to him and I was like, man, really great work. I hear all the participants saying amazing things about you, right? I think you're an amazing person for you to have this quality of impact, and that's how we struck a conversation. And he became curious about what I was doing, and I was like, well, I'm in HR, but honestly, this thing that you're doing is something that I want to do in life, right? Interestingly, that gentleman is a very good friend of mine today. His name is Steve Harris.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Wow.
So I connected with Fela when I was in school. Connected with Steve there. And it was about the period where I was already having that conversation in my head of transitioning, right? And Steve was working with Fela at the time. So, we kept on the conversation, right? It was a tough decision to make at the time because I left banking when nobody was leaving banking. And I say this because I left in 2009. So there was the economic recession that had begun in 2008. And there was a period, right, in the history of banking where there was a massive exodus. Exodus being that banks were laying off staff, right? It was major in that time of the crisis. But the organization I worked in was one of the few banks, if not the only one, that wasn't laying people off. And here was I considering laying myself off, where people were doing everything to keep their jobs, right? But I knew that at the time, if I didn't take the chance, right, I would probably never have taken it because I was still young, youthful. There was the appetite to take risks. I knew that if I continued on my path, I was one of those people who, people would see and they'll say, man, this guy has a future in this organization. I was one of those, young, vibrant, upwardly mobile people. So I knew that if I continued on that path, I would be getting promotions, and at a point it would be so difficult. The perks of the career path would be so much that it would be difficult to make such a decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely a tipping point for me.
Okay. During your consulting, you've helped a lot of companies achieve their peak performance and also surpass financial goals. What does peak performance mean to you?
Well, I think that peak performance is first of all considering all the different stakeholders. In every organization, there are various stakeholders that either the organization or the individuals in the organization serve.
Yeah.
Right? And we must consider the expectations of the different stakeholders before we can judge whether we're really delivering exceptional performance or what you would call performance. So what are the different stakeholders? You have your boss. Your boss is a stakeholder in your journey. You have subordinates, they're stakeholders. You have your colleagues, your peers. You have the management of the organization, they're stakeholders. You have customers, right? You have the industry at large, right, that you're operating in. Those are different stakeholders. They are independent observers. They don't work with you directly, but they're there. But they're observing you, and they may have a role to play in your own journey, either by a conversation they're having with someone that impacts on the perception they have of you. So all of these stakeholders have expectations. Peak performance to me, from my perspective and the way we operate in my organization, LYD Consulting,
Yes.
is to surpass the expectations of the stakeholders.
Okay.
Right.
They already have an expectation.
Yes.
Just is to see that they surpass it.
Yes.
Okay.
So the management has an expectation of a particular department within the organization that
Yes.
this year, this is our goal, this is what you expect you to do.
Yes.
Peak performance is seeking to go past, right, that level of success within the organization.
Yeah.
Right, or that level of success within the institution. Right, that's how I perceive it. Right, when we have a goal that we recognize that the potential and the capacity to not just meet it but surpass it exists, right, and we will do everything within our capacity to ensure that we're able to meet it.
Yeah. So what are the metrics that you look into to ensure that you help those companies surpass their expectations?
Well, then there are a number of metrics. You see, every business is primarily set up to make profit.
Yes.
So it's a going concern to generate revenue, but ultimately to be able to make profit.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes how do you make profit? You are either, cutting down on your expenses or your costs, right, or increasing your revenue. So sometimes there are cost-cutting interventions that organizations sometimes want to implement to be able to see how they are able to make savings with respect to the costs that they are incurring. Sometimes it is that, last year we did 1 billion, right? This year we want to double.
Yes.
Right, the figure that we're able to make last year, right? And when an organization has set such a goal for themselves, sometimes they need the services, of a consultant to be able to, one, empower their people with the skills, the belief. We set a limit for ourselves based on how much faith and confidence we have in ourselves to deliver on a certain result. So consultants come there to help the people believe in the potential that they possess to be able to do more than they did in the previous year, right? Two, to be able to help them acquire the skills. So sometimes it's the ability to be able to confidently stand before, a prospect and sell or present on behalf of the organization, right? So there are those skills or competency gaps that, relative to the goal, we're able to plug in solutions to meet those gaps that exist within the organization. So more often than not, even though there might be, for instance, people-related objectives, but ultimately those people-related objectives where, we want our people to be able to bond better, right? So that ultimately when they operate as a team, they can achieve an objective.
Yes.
Right? Ultimately, it is to drive revenue, to drive profit, to ensure that the organization is profitable. So we look at, different situations to ultimately drive performance being profitable.
Okay, different situations, and it could be anything.
Yeah, different. There are different.
Are there some examples that
challenges.
You can lay out?
Oh yeah. There are so many. And a typical example could be culture.
Okay.
Right. An organizational culture. Right. An organizational culture can ultimately determine the perception that a prospect or the audience out there has of the brand.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So if there are feelers that, these people, they're very hostile within that organization and they have a hostile culture, the feelers sometimes gets out and impacts on the perception that a prospect or a customer has about the organization.
Okay.
Right. So we look at things like that. What are the elements that drive culture, right, within an organization? Because whether you like it or not, every organization has a culture.
Yes,
right?
sure.
Whether it is intentionally created or not,
yes.
there is a culture.
There's a culture.
There is a culture that exists that creates a perception. The perception ultimately impacts on buying decisions.
Yes.
Right? So we look at the existing culture. Then we help the organization now determine what kind of culture they want to build, and what are the elements we need to now introduce to ensure that we're able to create and craft this culture and ensure that it is sustainable. It is that one, we're going to script it. Two, we're going to communicate it and cascade it down the line, and that communication has to be consistent, either through messages that we consistently send out. It could even be the way we brand, the environment, to culture the people to think, a certain way and, conduct their affairs a certain way. Within the organization, can we say this is the ideal Bankole Williams company person? Okay. Right? These are the kinds of qualities that we expect them to exude. What are the core values that we have as an organization? How do we ensure that these core values are inscribed in the hearts of people? Yeah. Right. So that's just one example of something that we look at that can ultimately tie to the performance of an organization.
Okay. Now, in your journey, your consulting journey so far, what do you think are the top 5 mistakes you see organizations make that hinder their performance?
So top 5 mistakes. So one is, I see that a lot of times organizations do not prioritize their people.
Prioritize their people? Yes. How do you mean?
When I mean prioritize their people, so for instance, people are the ones who ultimately, organizations are not made up of desks and tables.
Yes.
They're made up of people. People are the ones that will drive your profits. So when I say they don't prioritize, it then means that they don't apportion enough funds to develop their people, to have the skills to be able to deliver, right, on the goals that they've set for themselves. So I find that a number of organizations tend to prioritize generating profits, right, which obviously is why a business is set up, right, but they fail to realize that it is the people that drive the profits. So that definitely is, one mistake that I see that happen. Yes. Now, also relating to people, organizations tend to not prioritize how the people communicate or the interactions that go on with the people and how that ultimately impacts on the results that our organization has. Okay. So I'll give you an example. Whilst people drive profits, emotions drive people to drive profits.
Emotions drive people to drive profits.
It's a fact, right? Emotions impact on buying decisions or even your customers. But I'm saying the people within the organization, emotions drive them, right? If people are motivated, if they feel great, right, they will do great. So soft skills are usually not as prioritized as opposed to them acquiring maybe just technical things that have to do with, the direct work that they are having to achieve within the organization, right? So things like emotional intelligence, which is such a big deal now, especially in the current world that we are in. I find that a number of times that organizations, a lot of times don't pay attention to things like that. Another mistake would be structure.
Structure.
Yes. Right. Ensuring that proper systems are put in place such that an organization can run smoothly when there are transitions that exist within the organization. So there are instances where somebody ends up exiting an organization, right? He leaves, he resigns, and then there's nobody, within the organization that can carry it out. In fact, it's not just nobody, that's another problem. There is no system that has been put in place to ensure that somebody can quickly fit in to fill that role, to ensure that the work consistently runs without that person. So whether it is policies that you have in place, standard operating procedures, key performance indicators, KPIs, to measure people's performance such that you can tie somebody's contribution ultimately to the performance of the organization as a whole. So there's something that I bring to my team, but you can see the connection between what I bring to the team. You can see the connection between that and the performance of the organization as a whole. And you have certain metrics that you're using to measure, right? So ensuring that there's proper structure, right? Another problem would then be things like succession planning.
Succession planning.
Yes.
Okay.
Where organizations, for me, are not, they are going concerns, right? To recognize that beyond this time, so whilst we're doing great now, right, are we looking, 20 years from now, looking 30 years from now, right? What is the world going to look like? And how are we positioned to ensure that, our organization is still in existence and is thriving in that time?
Yeah.
Right. So there are procedural things that people can put in place, but there are also people-related things where you're looking at the organogram holistically and looking at how people fit into that organogram and how, if people are rising up the ranks, there are positions for them to feel where they see that there is a growth within the a growth path for them within the organization, right? But also, if people tend to leave, right, are there plans for leadership successions? Are there future line managers that were preparing to enter those leadership positions even as the organization expands and grows, right? That's definitely another problem that I see that organizations face.
Now, some people talk about like if you want to achieve, if a company wants to ensure their continuous success, some people tend to talk about that. What is more important? Is it the culture of the organization? Is it the team management? Is it leadership? Or is it their sales performance? What do you think is the number one thing that can ensure a company succeed?
Well, I've heard a number of people say a lot of times everything rises and falls on leadership.
Oh yeah, true.
Right? Leadership plays a very, very significant role, right? A leader, leadership is the capacity to inspire people to willingly follow you.
Yeah.
Right. And you see, it says one will chase 1,000, two will chase 10,000. So when you have the opportunity to work with people, you have the capacity to be able to have a multiplier effect, to do more significantly, right? And when you have the people, you then require the leadership to galvanize the people to achieve the results. Now, what I find a number of times, because in my interactions with different organizations, is that we have people in leadership positions, and it doesn't necessarily mean we have leaders in those positions.
We have people. It doesn't necessarily mean we have leaders in that same position.
So you can have a position. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a leader. So we can say you are the CEO. We can say you are the divisional head, right? We can give you that title.
Yeah.
But the title is not the proof of leadership. The proof of leadership is followership. That people willingly follow. That is the proof of leadership. Right? That I don't have to coerce them. I don't have to force them. I don't have to tell you, I am your boss. Don't you know I'm your leader? I don't have to tell you that for you to follow. For me to tell you that, then I'm depending on the title, meaning that if I don't have that title, then I don't have that influence. If people had a choice as to who will be their leader, and there was absolutely no consequence to whatever choice they made, the question is, will they choose you as their current leader? And I think that every leader needs to get to a position where he's honest with himself to acknowledge this and then ask himself this difficult question. If people had a choice and there was no consequence to whatever decision that they made, will they choose to follow you as a leader? Right. So leadership is inspiration, right? It's not intimidation. And I've worked in the bank. I've worked in the typical Nigerian banking industry. I've seen, high pressure environments, and I've seen how people intimidate others in order to be able to lead them or leverage on the position to lead. You don't necessarily have to have a position to lead. You need to have influence, right? In order to lead, and in order to have influence, you need to have impact, because impact is the seed that you have that you sow to reap the harvest of influence on people. True. Right. And this is when I have leadership, management sessions for executive management and all that. These are real conversations that we have to help people see that if we're able to inspire our people, if our presence causes the energy level in the room to rise and causes the confidence and the belief, the presence of a leader causes people to see that this problem that has plagued this institution is fixable. Because I am that charismatic and I've had that kind of impact, and they've seen my track record and they have that kind of quality of impact on them, and they believe in the target that has been given to them, that because Oga sees in us the capacity to do it, then we believe we can do it. And every day they are waking up to their desks with that level of optimism and belief in the face of opposition. Imagine the impact that can get, on an organization.
It's unbelievable.
So I've seen it happen so many times. My consulting firm is brought, to have sessions like this with the organization, and I'm seeing people who were intimidated by targets who are saying, we're going to increase that thing. And at the end of the year, the CEO is calling us to thank us, to pray for us, to say, man, what you said, it's the end of the year, we've been able to achieve it. That's the quality that we bring to the table.
Wow, this is deep. This is deep. Now, I also observe that you're a mind guy and you love things about mindset and things like that. Okay, but before we get into that, Live Your Dreams Africa Foundation.
Yes.
What's the idea and its mission?
Well, so it started, it was like 2013. And for me, the whole idea is, and my consulting firm is called Live Your Dreams Consulting. My foundation is called Live Your Dreams Africa. So I've always been very passionate about people living their dreams. I love when I see a fish in water. I see a bird flapping its wings. People operating in their natural habitat. I believe that we were all created for a purpose. We all have a design. I call it purpose by design. By observing the design of a thing, you can tell the purpose of a thing.
Sure.
Right? When you see that the bird has wings, you know that it was created to fly. Right? And it's in the same vein, from when I was in school, I had always just been fascinated by people doing authentically what they are created and wired for. So I wanted to give that, and all through my life, I had seen how people would, walk up to me and they'll become clear as to what they should be doing with their lives, So I thought to myself, that which I was doing on a small scale, I wanted to be able to do on a larger scale, right? So I then set up Live Your Dreams Africa at the time, and I was doing conferences. And the whole idea for me was, especially in the climate like our country in Africa, Nigeria and Africa, where people believe that things are tough, it's hard to live your dreams, just enter, the rat race, I saw that there were outliers. There were people who, against all odds, they've been able to achieve setting goals. They've been able to live their dreams. So I thought to myself, hey, what if I got these people to come and share their stories, right? And there's power in stories, and not just their success stories, but I was very particular about moments that they failed, right? It came, share these stories, and inspired people to believe that they could live their dreams. So it started out with us having conferences, and then here's where it gets interesting. After the conferences, people say, oh, you've inspired us. Oh, thank you very much. So what else? As in, now that you've inspired us, how, what other practical things are we going to do? And it used to kind of upset me, like, I've spent all my money, because my conferences were free, to do this for you.
And asking for more.
But you see, sometimes in the things that upset you are hidden gems to unfold the next layer of your life. Right? And in that question was okay, you've inspired the people. How about empowering them with the skills? So that's really what now birthed the Dream Development Center, where not only are people inspired to believe that they can live their dreams, now we're equipping them with the skills. So it was very simple. It was a very simple model for me. I thought, how can I be a bridge? I knew people who had successful people in different walks of life, who've been able to do really amazing things. And these people wanted to give back, but they needed a trustworthy, reputable platform, to be able to work with.
Yes.
I knew people who desired to learn from them. What if we created a bridge, right? So that's how Dream Development Center was birthed. We started with photography. We had Kelechi Amadi, BTY, Bello, Jide Odukoya, Chida 5. All these guys come partner with us to develop a curriculum and empower young people to believe that, not just believe, to acquire the skill to be able to set up their businesses.
Yeah.
And some of these guys are doing incredible stuff, winning awards internationally, not just locally, because somebody, gave birth to a dream.
Yes.
So the objective of the foundation is to solve the problems of unemployment and underemployment, right? By equipping people with skills to set up successful and thriving businesses.
That's deep. Now, when it comes to mindset,
Yeah.
and mind reform, what does mindset really mean? People talk about it all the time.
Okay, that's a bottle of wine and 2 glasses for that. A mindset is, it's the core of everything, and I think that there is so little conversation around this thing. It is so important. It is a fixed mental disposition that predetermines a person's interpretations of situations and ultimately their outcomes. I'll take it again because I'm looking at
It's quite deep. I'm trying to
The
digest
mindset
it.
is a fixed mental disposition. So there's a position that your mind has taken. There's a mold that it has taken. There's a shape it has taken.
Yes.
Right? Now that shape that it has taken predetermines. So ahead of a situation, we already know the outcome once we know your mindset. So it hasn't happened.
Yes.
But because of that shape that it has, we can predict the end. So it's a fixed mental disposition that predetermines. And I like the word disposition because disposition can mean a number of things. So it's made up of 2 words, disposition. So sometimes it is you being out of position in your mind. But
in the mind already.
You are already out of the position where the blessing can meet you. But you are praying for the blessing, but you don't realize that you are already off track. And for me, that's the frustration. I saw people who were good. They were good people. So hardworking people. I saw prayerful people who were frustrated people. And they were frustrated because they were putting in so much and getting so little. And they didn't realize that what was responsible for that was their mindset. It was out of position. So it's a fixed mental disposition that predetermines, right, the way your interpretation of the situation. So it determines how you look at something. 2 people can look at the same situation and their interpretations are different.
Totally different.
One person sees an opportunity, another person sees a problem.
True.
Right? So it predetermines how you interpret something, but it ultimately determines how your outcomes, what you get out of life. Right? So that's how I view, mindset. And I have seen how it has determined the outcomes of people. So I'll give you I've worked with so many people, so I've heard tons of stories. Right? It's so many stories, right? In one class I was teaching, and as I was teaching, a gentleman hit the table and he's like, Bankole, this thing that you have shared is so true. So I looked at him and I said, tell me, why do you say so?
Yeah.
And he said to me, Bankole, do you know that when I was growing up, I always heard my father make this statement. Very simple statement. That which you do not get by toiling, it is not yours.
Are you serious?
Yes. So his father, that was something now. His father obviously wanted him to be a person of integrity, do not steal, just work hard for what is yours. But that phrase was that which you don't get by toiling. It is not yours.
Wow.
From an early age where you are extremely suggestible, Now, he didn't realize that that had created a disposition, a mindset, a way he viewed making money and the efforts that ultimately translate to money in the hand or cash in the bank and all that. So when it was not until this day when I was teaching that this guy hit the table and it was like the scales fell off his eyes, the light bulb came on, and he said to me, I just realized why I have been struggling.
Wow.
He said to me, Bankole, anytime an opportunity came to make money that was easy, I never gravitated towards it. I never engaged that opportunity because the pathway to making money was toiling. And anything that did not equate to toiling was not a genuine and authentic path to making money. Sometimes money comes to you effortlessly and easily. Who says it has to be? It has to be through sweat. Right? Who says so? Right? There's actually a scripture in Proverbs that talks about overwork. Right? That to him that overworks, it's like like a bird that flaps its wings, it will take your wealth away. Right? So there's that balance, and obviously this is not to discourage hard work or working, not at all, but it is you recognizing a posture in your mind that helps you understand that abundance is available for you. It's there, but most people, especially in these parts, have a consciousness of lack. Right? And that consciousness of lack brings lack. Right? Yeah, so
now you've spoken so deeply about this. Now, I think nature of the core of all you shared is the positioning of the mind.
yes.
How can you achieve the right positioning of the mind to be able to fulfill a particular desire?
I think the first thing is to discover the wrong positioning. Right?
Is it possible to discover the wrong position?
Oh yeah, to discover the problem. So you first of all have to discover that there is a shape that your mind has taken. You first of all have to discover that you have a mindset. So that's the first step. And we all have mindsets for different things, right? People have mindsets for money. People have mindsets for their health. People have mindsets for their careers, right? Look at the different facets of your life and honestly be able to acknowledge the mindsets that you have. Now, what are some of the ways to discover if you have a disposition? What are some of the ways? Pressure is a revealer.
Pressure.
Yes. Pressure would always reveal to you the content of a container.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah.
If we squeeze an orange, what do we get? Orange. Right? We won't squeeze an orange and get cucumbers.
Impossible.
Impossible.
Yeah.
So the question is, when life squeezes you, what comes out? Those are moments of realization. Right?
Yeah.
So right now in our country, Nigeria, there seems to be a squeezing of people's pockets. It seems to be a discomfort. Under pressure, what do you say? Right? What do you blurt out? What comes out of you? It's out of the abundance of
the heart.
That heart.
The mouth
The
speaks.
mouth is going to say something that's in alignment with your alignment or
The
your
inner being.
or exactly of the inner being or the disalignment of that inner being. It will always show up. So pressure reveals to you the posture of your mind. Posture of your mind. I'm reminded of a lady who I was talking. A friend of mine was telling me that she bought a new phone, right? And this was some years back. She took it to her office. Her colleague saw it, and the girl is like, "Man, such a lovely phone. This is the phone I've always wanted. I love this phone. I would love to have it." And then she proceeds to ask the question that reveals the true contents of her heart sometimes. So how much did you buy it? And then my friend proceeds to tell her, and instantaneously she blurts out, "God forbid."
Wow.
That that I will spend
This amount of money.
this kind of money. Now, again, I must add, this is not me saying
License
someone
to-
a license to just
Excessively spend.
excessiveness. No, it's not that. But I'm saying that it's important to be able to realize how you react under pressure. That's what we're talking about here.
Okay.
So her spontaneous
Reaction.
response to a desire that she had was God forbid it. So can you see how sometimes we're conflicted, right? We want something, but there is a disposition inside of us that wants something else, right? So it's as though there is another law at work in our members. So
yeah.
you will for something, says that which I will to do, I do not. Why? So I will for something, but I do not do it. Why? There is a law at work in my members. There is a disposition that is not in alignment with my desires, right? And until we fix that disposition, people struggle with experiencing manifestations.
Wow. Now, I think with some of the challenges you talked about and how people put their position in their mind is, if growing up, you've had a lot of experiences, let's say failure, challenges, and all of that, like something hitting you left, right, and center. The challenge is not going to come from how do you now try to reposition yourself to see that all those experiences that have formed who you are growing up to this particular level, that you can be able to start changing them. Even though you are still living, you are still seeing the current environment where you are, everything is still showing the other negative something that you don't want. How then do you change that position to see that your mind starts seeing the other side of the positive thing that you want to see, even though the negative surrounds you?
Beautiful question. So those experiences that you've had that have formed you,
Yes.
right? This is where I like to say it. You may not be able to do anything about your past, but your future has no reason to take you by surprise, right? So I didn't choose the parents I was born to, the environment I was born in, all of that. But now I can be intentional about those things. So the point is, once we are able to identify how these dispositions are formed, we can then use that formula to form a mindset that puts us in the right position. So how did you get this current mindsets that you have? So I'll tell you. The first way, most of the mindsets that a lot of people had and formed, they formed them as kids.
Yes.
From childhood.
As a starting point.
Now, when you're a child, you're in a very subconscious state, right? How do I know you're subconscious? You're not conscious, you're not aware. How many people remember the day they were born? You came out of mother's womb, you're like, I'm here. Nobody remembers that.
Yeah.
How many people remember their first birthday? Their parents spent so much money, you don't remember jack.
Nothing.
Right? So they were subconscious. So it was later on they started gaining consciousness. So the first thing we need to recognize is that mindsets are formed when we are in a subconscious state. So that's how we were as kids. And when you are in a subconscious state, right, anything that happens around you goes into your long-term memory. You soak it.
Yes.
Right? So when the first thing you do when you come into this world is you need a model to be able to use to relate with this world. So you're forming those models, right? You are downloading what I call softwares. So it's like a phone, like a mobile phone, You buy a mobile phone and then you have to go to the Play Store to download apps to be able to perform certain kinds of functions. Same thing. See, we're all sophisticated technology. Well, we download softwares too. So when you came into this world as a child, you were downloading softwares.
Yeah.
But you were downloading softwares based on whatever you were exposed to. So if you grew up with a parent who was experiencing lack and consistently communicated lack, and there's a difference. It's one thing to lack. Is another thing to reinforce it in your conversations with your kids.
What are a typical example of that reinforcement?
Beautiful question. Typical example is a child wants something and as a parent, you don't have the money for it. How do you react to that child? So you go to the mall and the child goes to the store and is jumping around and saying, Mommy, I want this, and grabs it. and you feel they're embarrassing you, and then you spank the child and say, drop it. It's expensive, we can't afford it. Now, the child, first of all, is subconscious. Number two, you just smack them. So you've put them in a state of fear, and in that state, they are extremely receptive.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To whatever is happening. And then you say to them, it's expensive, we can't afford this. Now, children do not have they haven't developed the intellectual capacities to be able to fully analyze and understand what you've said. The question is, what meaning is the child receiving when you make such a statement, right? The meaning that the child is receiving is, I'm not worthy of this. Things like this are not for people like me, right? That's now, to an adult, that's not what they intend to communicate. But remember, a child does not have the conscious faculty, his consciousness that analyzes and can process. They don't have it. So in that moment, especially when it now happens frequently, their understanding to that situation is, things like this, I don't qualify for it. They're just not for people like me. Like, when I was growing up as a child, my parents sent me to a very good school, right? But I also know that they had struggled financially, at certain points. And in school, I'll see kids with comics, toys, all those things. You go back home and you ask your parents for it, right? And then my father would say, Bankole, do you know what that person's father did? That we in this family, we're a very humble family, we manage, right? Do you think money grows on trees? Right? Now, in a typical African parent, you may have said that,
yes,
right, to you as a child. Now, unconsciously, the question is, what interpretation what model, what software are you downloading as regards your interaction with money? Do you feel like we live in an abundant universe? Or have you learned that there is scarcity? There's not enough to go around, right? So those are some examples of things that I see that, and parents have the best of intentions.
Yes.
I know that, but
yes,
children do not learn your intentions; they learn your expressions.
sometimes they do that out of ignorance.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Right. Children pick on your expressions, not your intentions. Right. They don't have the faculties to be able to say, "Oh, mommy didn't really mean that." Right, it's later on they can begin to process, but it's the expression that they
hold in.
Yeah.
Now, some of the major challenges, not about the mindset and what they have picked up. Some people tend to believe that their mindset is the correct mindset. There are some people that you discuss with, and you tend to be very shocked with the way they reason and how they process issues.
Yeah.
But if you try to correct them, they try to believe that the one you're saying is the wrong one. Their own belief is the right one. So how do you sit down and process, or what determines someone to know that this mindset is wrong and this mindset is right? Like when two people are trying to make an argument regarding what is right and what is wrong, both of them is mindset that are trying to determine such conversation. So how do you know your own perception or your own idea of that mindset is the correct one?
I think it was Shakespeare that said in Hamlet, right, it's written this phrase there, says there is nothing good or bad, thinking makes it so. Don't argue with me, you can argue with Shakespeare.
And that's true, yes. What I quote, thinking makes it so.
Yeah, so we all go into, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are, right? So and I think that if we broaden our perspective, we would be able to accommodate other perspectives, right? So someone can say, "Oh, I'm right. This is what is right."
Yes.
There are so many things that we thought were right that now the world has shifted and acknowledged that they aren't right, right? There was a time they thought the earth was flat, right? There was a time that we believed that the earth was the center of the universe.
Yes.
All the planetary bodies orbited around the earth, right? It was, in fact, if you said something contrary, you were called a heretic, right? So So we can all come to a table of negotiation and insist that our position is perfect. But what I have observed is where you stand determines what you see. What you see determines what you say. Or determines your strongly held opinions. Your strongly held opinions become your perception and your what you believe to be truth, right? And I have found out that we all stand in different positions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I'm standing with my background. And if you don't have the privilege of my background, you can hastily judge my view. But if you stand where I stand, then you would see what I see and say what I say.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that we create more bandwidth for peace and for us to be able to work seamlessly with people when we're able to step into their shoes and see things from their worldview.
Okay.
Right. So I can be careful with absolutes. Right. I think what ultimately would matter is asking ourselves, whatever we have chosen, does it serve the highest, grandest versions of ourselves? And does it serve the highest, grandest versions of other people? Because there must be ecology. It cannot benefit you and then do a disservice to the world.
Okay.
Right.
I think that's the best way to see it. Does it benefit the world? Does it benefit people around you? Because some people are more self-centered when it comes to their own belief system and what they believe is the right thing. So long it benefits them alone, they think that makes it right. If it doesn't, but I think if you look at it in a way that, okay, does it benefit everybody around me and not just you alone?
Yeah, and if you just think about the system of how, you observe, just observe. Wisdom cries out on the streets. If you look at, the inanimate things of God can be seen through the things that are made. If you observe nature and how things operate, you would see certain laws. Nothing that was created solely for itself. Think about it.
Yeah.
Just think about it. Fish, was not just created for itself, right? There's a cycle of life. As you are exhaling, what you are exhaling is what some other thing is inhaling.
Yeah.
Right. The carbon dioxide that we are giving out, is beneficial to plants, right? We're all serving another. That nature was created that way. Water was not created for water in itself. It was created to serve the fish, to serve humanity, to serve, we live in a universe that is consistently serving.
Now, when people talk about having a positive belief towards achieving anything, some people continually face failure over and over again when they're trying to achieve a particular thing. And how do you maintain a positive growth mindset or belief towards achieving something despite the failure you consistently receive?
So, I think that failure is part of the process of life, right? And I think the meaning we attach to a thing determines what that thing is, right?
Meaning we attach to it. Okay.
Yes. So a lot of people attach so much of a negative connotation to failure, right? Life is in cycles. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, right? In the moments when you are down, do you consider yourself down and out? Or do you consider that this is an opportunity for you to acquire a skill, right? To learn something new, to evolve? There is, there can be no up if there's no down. Think about it. There can be no left if there's no right. We live in a polarized world.
Yeah.
Right? So appreciating polarity and the gradient, the differential that it brings to make life experiential. I think that's very significant. Appreciating polarity to recognize the differential that it brings for us to appreciate, the gradient that it brings for us to just appreciate, life. How can there be joy if there were no moments where you had to shed a tear? If everything was same, then there is no gradient. There's no experience. It's the variance that causes an experience.
Even if the variance is painful.
Yes, and it's painful, but the contrasting side of pain is what's joy, right? For the joy that was set before him, despite the pain and suffering, because there is something on the other end of it, right? So when we live in a world of times and seasons, right? So sometimes you are in a season, but that season should also be seen as a preparatory ground, right, for an elevation. So my encouragement is that we are cautious with how we label. We are down, but we're not out. We're not down and out, right? This has come to pass. It's a season. It will pass, right? Yes, it's dark, but morning will come. It's all part of the process. The real deal is, I may be down, but I have to pick something up when I'm down, right? There is an evolution that needs to happen. There's learning that needs to happen, right? Am I mindful of what I need to learn, the adjustment that I need to make so that I don't repeat the same class, right? And keep repeating again and again and again, right? Because once you evolve, life will always, once you think you have graduated, life will show you that,
there are still more steps to take. Now, so, okay, we'll still come back to the mindset, but I wanted to dive deeply into spirituality. What does spirituality actually mean? Because some people just think it's just about praying. Is it belief system? Is it about a mindset? What is spirituality?
It's very, so let's look at the word spirituality, right? So at the core of it, there is spirit, yeah?
Yeah.
So for you to be spiritual, you recognize that there is spirit.
Yes.
Right? So I ask people this question. I'm one of those, I like to simplify, as you must have noticed. I like to make things simple for you to understand. So I ask people, what is spirit? And I've asked this question tons of times. I've heard all sorts of answers within different circles, whether it's circles, religious circles or academic circles, what really is spirit? You hear varying answers, right? So for you to be spiritual, it then means that there's the recognition that there is spirit, and the recognition that life is non-physical. The recognition that life is beyond the flesh. The recognition that this is a container, right? That life is beyond what I can touch, what I can hold. There are layers of reality beyond what I can sense as a human being, right? It's first the recognition, and a lot of people live their lives conscious of physical, conscious of tangible, and do not place their consciousness beyond the realm of tangibility, right? So if you're not conscious of a realm beyond the realm of tangibility, then maybe you're just a material person. And I know some people would resist, I can't call it materialistic, but if that's where your consciousness consistently is in, then maybe that's your address. Maybe that's really where you are. So it's the recognition that there are layers of reality beyond what my eyes can see, what my ears can hear, what my hands can touch, right? There are layers of reality beyond that, right? I did science in school, and I'm very fascinated by science because I believe that there's a balance between science and spirituality, right? I don't think that there are two extreme ends at all, right? And in science, when we look at the spectrum of reality, the electromagnetic spectrum, right? Human beings only perceive visible light.
Visible light.
Yes. So there are other layers of reality in that spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum. What human beings perceive using their senses, right, is just visible light. Guess what percentage of that spectrum visible light is? It's less than 1%. I think it's even less than 0.1%. So if we're going by our senses, we're only perceiving less than 0.1% of reality. Now, that is crazy. So if you are judging by the seeing of the eye, right, and you see these things in religious texts, we walk by faith and not by sight, not by sensory perception. We recognize that there are layers of reality beyond what our senses can pick. Spirituality is the consciousness of layers of reality beyond what our senses can pick.
Now, the thing is, how do you differentiate being spiritual and being religious? Are they two different things?
Well, being religious, generally the perception is there are a set of traditions, set of activities that need to be practiced in a group, an organized group, right? And these are our traditions, right? In Christianity, there are different groups, there are different expressions, right? And what differentiates one expression to the other are the beliefs and the traditions and the actions, the activities, right? The culture, right? For me, being religious is obsessing about the traditions, right? Even, Jesus made reference to people obsessing about traditions in scripture, obsessing about the traditions and all that at the expense of the consciousness of the layers of reality that exist beyond what our senses can pick, and not being mindful of being conscious of a relationship with God, a relationship with the divine one who is the author and the finisher and the creator of life, right? So spirituality is, and no one sees God with their physical eyes. So it's you being aware of a layer of reality beyond the senses, and being aware that in that reality there is this. How do you describe God? How do you describe the one in which eternity resides? You almost cannot frame him using words, but that he exists, and you have an ongoing relationship with him, because you also recognize the personal dimension that you have with a universal God. Yeah.
Now, I think I want to put it this way. We spoke about mindsets and belief system,
Yes.
which is how do we determine which one is a right mindset or wrong mindset? Now, obviously, you're a Christian.
Yes, I am.
A Christian will say Christianity is the right. A Buddhist will say his is the right. A Hinduist will say the same thing. Or an atheist will say the same thing. So who determines which religion is right, or which do you go for?
God determines, right? Because for me, I'm a Christian. Right?
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, and I'll hold the tenets of the faith that I believe in. Right? Some other people were born in some other parts of the world, and just by acculturation, just by being in that space, right, you are exposed to the traditions and the activities and the lifestyle, right, in that space. I wasn't born in those spaces, right? So honestly, I can't speak of what my experience would have been like, right? But I can speak of my own current experience and my appreciation for that experience, and how that experience has been beneficial to me and to the people around me and to the people that exist within the same faith that I profess, right? So I have a genuine appreciation for Jesus, for Jesus the Christ, right? And the price that he paid, and the fact that it's made me a genuinely better person. Now that is my experience, right? I am not privy to some other person's experience, and that's why you'd see that people hold so dear, what they've been familiar with and exposed to. I don't dwell so much in the intricacies of right and wrong, right? I dwell in the authenticity of my experience and how that serves me and serves people around.
So it's literally about what you are exposed to and not actually about what you discover for yourself. Because if you grew up maybe somewhere like in India, maybe practicing their religion. So did you sit down and make a conscious decision, or is it because you grew up in a Christian home and you just choose to become a Christian?
Well, I'll start by saying I was born in a Christian home. My parents are Catholic. I was born in that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done any other thing at the time because that wasn't my exposure. That wasn't what I was exposed to. But at some point in time, I then became conscious and I then became aware, right? And I became more serious with my Christian faith. But I would also say that beyond that, I then became a seeker of truth, right? And just a seeker, or one who seeks to understand what genuine spirituality is, right? Beyond what I had been told. And I think that this is a practice that's important for everybody.
Okay.
Don't just go with something because you were told. Investigate for yourself. I think it's only fair. If there is a life beyond this life, and what we uphold or believe in this life will determine the experiences after. I think it's only, and the experience after, in fact, trumps this one. You spend 80 years on earth, compare that to eternity. I think it's only wisdom to be able to do your own inquisition, your own inquiry, your own, quest for truth, right? And I believe it's very, very subjective, right? People will come up with generic frameworks and everything, but it's just wisdom. You're an entity, an individual that has a brain, to be able to process information yourself, to be able to do that for yourself, to know what the truth is.
How do you believe there is eternity?
Yeah, so how do I know that there is eternity? It says, while you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. How do you know what doesn't exist? Just think about it. How do you? There was no existence, so how is there knowledge of the existence? Right. Our existence transcends this realm.
But that's practically what you read. So how do you? Because why I'm trying to say this is nobody has been able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that there's actually another life after this life. Some believe once you're dead, you're gone. Whatever you're trying to interpret is based on what you've read as a Christian.
Oh, yeah.
So what proves it beyond reasonable doubt that indeed there's a life after this world?
See, the truth of the matter is, except you've gone there and come back. Truth, and that's the truth.
Nobody has got there and come back.
The truth is, well, one person did that I know.
That you
His name
know
is Jesus.
You read it. You were not there.
Yeah, but he did. But historically, history has proven that there are people who were with him, who then narrated in the Gospels their own versions. But even in the time where Jesus existed, it was the time of the Roman Empire, right? There were Roman emperors and books written about them that also convey some of this information, right? So if you studied, materials around history and all that, right? There's proof that he actually did exist, right? And he actually did die and resurrect. But back to your question. So the truth is, nobody knows absolutely. Somebody will tell you they had an experience or they had an encounter, but that's what they said.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But we can establish patterns, right? I can lie with my words, my actions, but patterns give a form of truth. Now, one of the reasons I say this is because, like I said, I believe everyone should seek to know. And I have gone on my own journey to inquire, what is life like after this existence? And it brought me to a path where I started watching near-death experiences. They're called NDEs, and I've watched a lot of those things, hundreds of them, right? Of different people who at different points in time passed. They were on a hospital bed, maybe they lost consciousness, and they existed in a realm beyond this existence. And they narrated what those experiences were like. And I've seen common threads, which is why I'm talking about patterns. I've observed them to see some patterns that exist, with these experiences. And those patterns suggest to you that life does not terminate at death. That this is a cloak. In fact, it's like waking up in another reality. It's not, it's not the end of an era, where we're dropping this body, this body that's bound by space and time, right? And existing as that authentic spirit that we are in the tangible, real existence beyond this one, right? So I've seen that thread, right? And if you study science, they tell you that energy is not created or destroyed, right? It's eternal. If something is not created and it is not destroyed, it's only transferred, it suggests that it is eternal. So it is always in existence. There's no point where you're creating it, it's just changing form. So we are just changing form when we leave this earth. So science shows that with respect to how it relates with energy, right? And energy is everything. It exists in everything. The same way spirit consists of everything. There is nothing that is static. Everything is consistently in motion, influenced by spirit, right? Or what, in science parlance, they might decide to call it energy, right? So going by all of these things which I've observed, the truth is, no one knows of a certainty, but I think that one of the worst things that can happen is to choose a position in these debates that does not cater for the possibility of an eternity. I think that is worse. That's okay. There's no existence after this existence, and you've chosen that authoritatively to believe that, only to find out that there is one. I think that's one of the worst experiences that anyone can have. So, in as much as we all know in parts, right? We have to take a position. And in taking a position, I'm just saying, take a position that that will serve you.
Yeah. This is quite deep. Now, when it comes to doing right or wrong, in Christian faith, we know this sin and this is right. So most people now, what do you think generally about the Christian faith, especially in this Nigeria? We will practice it. Some people just believe that, okay, as a Christian, there are some things you can do and there's some things that you can just say, okay, you do it and say you receive forgiveness and all of that. What do you determine to say, this thing is actually right and this is actually wrong, apart from what the Bible says?
Well, we all have a conscience. Every man has been born with that inner compass. Now, sometimes some people's consciences are seared, and by consistently repeating something, right, you become hard of hearing, you become dull with respect to your sensing of that thing. It's just normal, When you repeat a certain act, the way you feel about it, right, is impacted by it. But when we all came into this world, if you look at a child, there is that purity and innocence that you see and you sense.
Yes.
That's the authentic manual that we came with before the world placed on us labels that caused us to deviate.
Yeah.
Right? So if anything different was supposed to be the way, then maybe we should have shown up at birth that way. Right? But we didn't show up at birth that way. It tells you that there is a purity and innocence that is authentic to the kingdom from which we came, right? Because there's an existence that before this one, you can argue it, but it's real, right? And you came with the culture of that kingdom, when you were born. And then life happens, your parents, give you with their own level of ignorance. They give you that. Society gives you its own version of truth, all that. Life just happens, and then, there begins to become an adjustment along the way. But as those adjustments are being made, that inner compass on the inside of you is pricked, is poked, right? To tell you that nah, this is not how we act, right? This is not how love acts. And when you see the benefits of love, right, and what it has done to add value to another person's life, it suggests to you that this is good. I'll give you an example. There are people on there are handles that I follow. There's one particular gentleman is in Canada, and he just goes out of his way to bless people. He finds somebody reading in the library, right, and he knows that person is struggling. He offers to give him a laptop, right, and he has a very viral community of people that follow him, and he now puts out that video, and everybody wants to give. People are just giving to us a cause. Authentically within our nature is love. Somewhere hidden in the deep recesses of our hearts, there is something on the inside of you that resonates. Why is it that you are pushed to tears? Why does something move on the inside of you when you see that? It's feedback to you that there is a side of you that authentically recognizes that this is good.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
That's a very interesting question. I do not know, right? To be honest, I don't have solid answers, to be very candid. As a Christian, it says it is appointed to man to die but once, right? It says that. I have also heard stories, right, that may not necessarily align with that narrative.
Yes.
So it makes you wonder.
Yeah, true.
So it just makes you wonder.
Exactly.
Right? So I don't claim to be the sole repository of knowledge. I don't claim to know it all.
Now, okay, what do you think is generally, as a Christian then, now since you're a Christian, what do you think is generally the wrong things that you observe that is happening in Christendom that is shaping the narrative wrongly? Because most people now are falling out of faith, not actually because we aren't believers, probably because of what they have been seeing over and over again that has happened. So it makes them to think, this thing I've been doing, I need to question it again. What do you think are some of those things that is causing that lack of disbelief in many people?
Well, as you may have observed, I'm not really one to focus on rights or wrongs. I believe in finding out what the original intent was and ensuring that we are aligned to what the original intent was, right? Christ came, he died for all, right? And there was a life he lived. There was the gospel he preached. There was a way he lived his life. There was a way he spoke to his disciples to live, right? Now, he existed within a certain time and a certain context, and we must be able to bring that context into our time and be sure that we are aligned with his core message and what he stood for, the values that he stood for. Now, when we are out of alignment, then we should ask questions. Right? If our core message is not the message of the kingdom, right, that he spoke for, right? If we don't resonate and recognize that he actually said, greater works shall we do, and we're not aligned with the greater works, then we should lean in and ask questions, right? If we've been told a narrative that we have held on to and believed that doesn't quite align with what we have read of his life and his existence on earth, right? And his tenets and his values and his traditions. Like I said, within a religion, so to speak, there are those tenets, values, actions. Then we should question, right? So for me, like I said, I think it's very, very subjective, right? I don't want to impose my own ideas or beliefs, but I think that we should use Jesus as our template to assess, to see if whatever we're practicing holds weight.
Because most people will say, most people have tried to call many pastors these days, you call them pastor premiers, because it's more like money centered, everything is about money. Or people will look at the way the situation of the country is, and then you tend to question the Christianity we practice in the part of the world, because if you look at many non-believing nations, doing very well, leadership-wise, economic-wise, everything, looking perfect, giving the citizens what it ought to be, as in what naturally humans should expect to live in the same environment. But here we practice it to the high heavens. But if you look at everything, it goes the negative. What is really the problem? So that's why you see people tend to question the Christianity and the righteousness people believe in.
For me, what is a religion without transformation? Right? What is spirituality without transformation, without genuine change? And that we should practice something that we see consistently guaranteeing results, right? Yes, the means is important, definitely. We must also look at the means, but we should also check, are we getting results?
That is it.
We should also, and if we're not, could it be that there is an adjustment that we need to make? So it's not to junk it and say, oh, this thing doesn't work, this is wrong. If you look at the history of Christianity, there have been evolutions that have happened over time, right? There was a time where a dispensation thought that they knew it all, right? And there was an evolution. How did the Protestant, expression come about? They protested, right?
Yeah.
And there have been different errors that we've made over time.
Yeah.
The time of the Crusaders, all that. There have been all that. So what makes us honestly believe that in this time there are no errors that we're making, that we honestly need to come to a point of ownership about, right? So to answer your question, I believe that there are adjustments that need to be made. There are things that we need to look at. Could it be that there is a layer of understanding that we sometimes have left out? Like you said, how is it that some other nations are thriving and we're not? How is it that in these parts we invest so much time and energy, for instance, in prayer?
Yeah.
Right? And trust me, I am an advocate of prayer, right? But that we have not really seen how that has translated holistically. I'm looking at the whole. There are obviously pockets here and there. Holistically, how that has translated in change. So the question is, what are those adjustments? I'll tell you, one of those major adjustments is a mindset shift. And that's one of why this conversation is so critical. If we're not deliberate and intentional about shifting the mindsets of the collective and of the whole, people will remain in captivity. And we've seen this historically in scripture. It's there. The children of Israel, they saw the greatest workings of God's miracles. They saw it all. They saw all the plagues come upon the Egyptians. And God that promised the promise, right, seemingly, it almost looked like he stopped them from entering the promised land. Or he didn't stop them, but what they did made him make a pronouncement. So it makes you wonder, what was it about the children of Israel that ensured that, a good chunk of them didn't enter the promised land? It was their mindset, right? There was a way they came out of Egypt, but they still had Egypt in them. They still had the disposition of Egypt in them. They still had that way of thinking. And it was so bad that they murmured and complained that it was better that we were in Egypt
than this.
Right. So if what we are doing is not translating into into interventions that are targeted at shifting our inner configuration, not just the activity, but that our inner configuration has shifted, right? Then we need to take a step back and look at what we're doing, right? Because as within, so without. As it is in heaven, and heaven is not just a geographical location above, so it shall be on earth, right? Until that shifts, right, we will struggle. We will have all the trappings of Christianese and all that, but, we may not be displaying the power thereof.
Do you think it has become a business?
No, I won't say that. I don't dwell in generalizations.
But it seems more like it.
What do you say?
It seems more like it.
Well, it's subjective. Different people have their different opinions. I don't dwell in generalizations. I wouldn't say, I can't speak for everyone, right? There are some people who, the way they conduct their affairs, you can see that they're all about the money. But for some of us, they're actually genuine, right? And we cannot, on the basis of our own personal experience, use that to cover everybody's experience. Some people have had, I go to a church and I'm very happy with my pastor. I'm happy with what happens there. Some other people may not be happy with their own experiences, and it's absolutely fine. It's understandable. But I just won't generalize. Some, they will be accountable before their maker, right? Their priority is to generate funds. For some others, their priority is to make people better, right? I won't, for the sake of those who want money, right, rubbish the efforts of those who have done great work. It's in the same vein, by virtue of what I do, some people may decide to call me a motivational speaker. I've heard people generalizing about motivational speakers, name it, claim it people. They come at us. There are so many memes and things that people put out there. Yeah. Do I appreciate that generalization when I know that I'm very authentic and people's lives have been transformed by what I do?
Yeah.
I don't. So why would I extend to another what I don't want to be extended to me?
Okay. Now, the thing there is that, some people can be buried in a particular thought pattern, negative belief system. How can you be able to cultivate a positive mindset and break free from negative thought patterns and belief?
Well, like I said earlier on, the negative beliefs, how did you form them? Remember, I started off by saying you were in a subconscious state. So you want to embody a positive mindset. You then have to be mindful of the moments where you are very subconscious, because in those moments you're extremely suggestible, right? And we all are switching in and out of consciousness every time.
Yeah.
Every time. So in those moments where you are unconscious, you are highly suggestible. The question is, who is determining the suggestion? Are you the one determining it? Or is it what you randomly watch on TV? Right? Or is it, what you read on social media that's determining that? So you have to predetermine what you want and play it out for yourself in the moments where you're very subconscious. So in predetermining, what does that mean? Oh, I recognize I have a scarcity mentality, right? So I think that making money is a Herculean task. I think that making money is hard. I have to be honest with myself to recognize that I actually believe that. And the way you know, like I said, pressure is a revealer. You would know. Your heart will tell you. You went to church on the 31st of December. They said this year will be your year of double. You shouted amen. But your heart was tugging at you and saying, you that I know. You that's feedback to you that there's a part of you that is not yet converted. Now, how do you convert it? Recognize what your own mindset is. My mindset is, I believe that making money is a Herculean task. I've recognized that. Flip the script, right? Rewrite that in an empowering way. Money comes to me effortlessly and easily. Money comes to me speedily. Money loves me. It selects me out of everyone in an audience, right? People and organizations are seeking opportunities to pay me in exchange for my gifts. Create something that's really empowering for you, right? And play it out to yourself. When you are conscious, but particularly taking advantage of those moments where we slip into unconscious states. And one of those ways to get to the storehouse of those beliefs is actually through a practice called meditation. Yeah.
Meditation. How do you mean? Break it down. Break that aspect down.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll take some time.
Just break it down.
Right. When I talk about meditation, there are so many generalizations. Some people say, "Oh, this is that woo-woo thing that people in the East do," all that. See, I just laugh. I laugh because, you can detest the practice of meditation. Yeah, I don't like it. My pastor said it's evil. Yeah. You can choose to not believe in the sun. Say, I don't believe in the sun, I don't believe in his heat, you will still be subject to the sun. So you can argue, there are so many things we can argue about, but it doesn't rule out the fact that we're subject to it. So why do I say this? You cannot not meditate, take it from me. You cannot not meditate. We all do it. We are always switching in and out of consciousness.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. We all meditate. So I'm not having a conversation around something that I'm not telling you to do that you're not already competent in. You already do it. But a lot of times, most people do it for what they do not want. So I'll give you a typical example. Worry. Worrying is meditation. It is. It's meditating on what you do not want. That's what worrying is. So I'll give you a typical example. You have an unpaid bill. It's not yet due. Right? It's due in a month's time or in 2 months' time, whatever. And right here and now in this moment, your consciousness, which is your essence, because you are not this flesh, has traveled to the possibility of you not having the resources to take care of that bill. And you have traveled to the embarrassment that will come with it. Right? And you have thought within a limited frame. What is worrying? Worrying is selecting the worst case scenario and zooming in on all possibilities within that frame. There are so many other possibilities, but you haven't selected it with your consciousness. And you have traveled. You think that person is not here. I've not seen people that are in worry and you walk past them and they don't see you. You have to go and then they come back. You think they were here? They were meditating on a life that they do not want. So I'm telling you, I am not talking about what you do not already do. You do it. We all do it. And then somebody comes and tells you to do it for what you want. And then you are arguing? How does that make any sense? That's really what it is. I'm telling you to now be deliberate about engaging your consciousness with a life that you want. Isn't that wisdom? It's just wise to do it. See, this world, we live in it's a universe. We live in a universe that doesn't discriminate. And there are laws that don't discriminate. You can be a Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever. If you jump up, you will come down.
Sure.
is a law, right? And it doesn't discriminate. If you are evil, if you are good, it doesn't discriminate. So there are a number of these principles that do not discriminate. It's your intent that makes a difference.
Yeah.
So an evil man would use the same principle and use it for his evil, right? It doesn't discriminate, right? I think in Proverbs it says, the evil man shutteth his eyes and deviseth forward things and bringeth it to pass. That's if he's meditating on what he wants, right? But you will not now say that because someone has utilized that practice for evil, I will alienate myself from it. Nobody does that. Electricity kills people. People have been electrocuted, but you have not banned electricity in your house.
Yeah.
It has destroyed appliances. It has been used for evil, right? Have you seen people being electrocuted, tortured, all that? You watch it in movies and everything, but you haven't said, I will not connect to the grid. You haven't gone off grid. And then you judge a practice because of the stories that you have heard, right? And I've seen how I know that I'm going to be the greatest advocate of this practice in the whole of Africa and beyond, right? Because I have seen how immensely beneficial it has been to me and to countless of people out there. And I have seen it also in scriptures, right? Where these things are written and how they've impacted positively on the lives of people.
Now, zooming into the scenario you talked about, people painting looking into the negative and trying to look into that. Now, I've read people say over and over again time that when you want to make any major decision, even if you look at the positive side of it, you should also envisage the negative side of it. And then maybe just put your mind on, look at the worst case scenario, that what could happen if I do this. So if you go into that worst case scenario and it looks like something maybe you could accept if it eventually happens, then maybe you can make that decision. But if it's something that you look into and it's not something that you may like to happen, then don't go into it. So it's more like an example is if you want to purchase, you want to make a major purchase or you want to pay for a house. If you ask yourself, okay, I need to get into this house, ask yourself, what if I'm not able to afford it at the end of the day? What are people going to say? The shame around it. Is this something I can live with? If I can live with, then I go into it. So knowing that, okay, this is a possible worst case scenario. How do you make a decision? Do you rely on that to say, okay, let me look at the positive and the negative and say, okay, even if the negative happen, I can live with it. If it doesn't happen, then I can go with this. Isn't that another way to make that decision?
Really good question, right? It says, what things soever you desire, ask in prayer. Believing you have received, such things shall you have. Right? So it's, my world is very interesting because I'm a management consultant, so I work with frameworks that are universally acceptable within that world. And then I'm also a very deeply spiritual person who recognizes another world, right? So there's a layer where you want to look at all different possibilities.
Yes.
You know? And even scriptures make provision for this, right? Where you see no one builds a house without counting the costs.
Exactly.
Of it.
Yes.
Right? But in expressing your desire in prayer, it doesn't say what things soever you can afford. It says what things soever you desire. Desire is a seed of greatness, right? That can yield a harvest of results. So it's important to pay attention to desire. That's why it says what things soever you desire, not what another person desires, because sometimes we predicate our desires based on what's not authentically ours or someone else's, right? So it's important to pay attention to what your heart yearns for. Could it be that it is the manifestation in the future finding expression in the present. Because I recognize that there is nothing that you need or will ever need that God has not already provided. My perception of God and the unseen realities is different from how a lot of people see it. I don't think that God is running helter-skelter to cater to people's prayers.
Yeah.
I think that he exists in all existences, in all possibilities. There is nothing that will happen that shocks him, right? That he cannot or he has not already provided for. So the point is, when there is a desire, you need to pay attention. Could it be that it is the expression of a future potential in the present? Right? So I pay attention to desire. Right? So in answering your question, one, it's important to pay attention to desire. Now, the laws and the way things operate in this physical plane are a bit different, right? So in this physical realm, right, things happen, life happens. You have to do your risk assessments. There are things that can potentially happen. If you live in Nigeria, there's so many number of things, electricity, traffic, all that. So you then have to now also come to this realm and think of the potential risks and do your best to mitigate against the risks.
Yes.
The only challenge is when people obsess, not even just about the risks, but they obsess about the worst case scenario, which is what a lot of people do with worrying. And the reason why it is important to not obsess over it and not give it so much of your consciousness, there can be an awareness of the possibility of it, but to be aware of something being possible is different from obsessing over it. And obsessing over it is when your consciousness visits that possibility often. So in your waking moments where you go absent-minded and you travel, did you travel to the possibility of that thing happening? Because in channeling your consciousness in that direction, your consciousness is the divine essence within you that is powerful to activate a cause, to set a cause in motion. So if we're consistently visiting a reality we don't want, we're giving it feel, right? So that's what I think people should be careful with. How about obsessing over the possibility of that desire becoming your actuality? Right? That's why you have the capacities to dream. God gave us that for a reason. It's a tool in the journey of producing results.
You know why this is a bit controversial and deep is the fact that, you're bringing it in the angle of more of like spirituality, faith, and belief. But in every business structure, entrepreneurs, leader, setting up a business or whatever you're doing, people talk about the fact that when you're setting a business, like you said, the Bible made a provision for the fact that whom tries to build a house without thinking of the cost, you should set aside the worst case scenario and the possibility, because we know failures happen in life, which is the reason why we advocate right now that no matter the failure, try to bounce back and all of that. Yeah. Why shouldn't you also put the failure in place to also see, okay, this could happen, this could happen? Should you focus on, for you to make that decision that you want to make, should you try to magnify the failure and ask yourself, if this failure happens, how is it going to be? Or ask yourself, if I succeed, this is it. So which one should you focus on more for you to make that decision? Because I want to get the critical aspect and the time you should make a particular decision. Which should you focus on? Should you focus on seeing that failure could happen? If this failure happens, I should be more scared of this thing that there is the outcome, or I could ignore whatever be it and focus on just the possibility and the positivity that could happen if that thing succeeds.
You should obsess over your desires, what you want. You should be aware of the possibilities of failure or the the different scenarios that can play out, possible scenarios.
Yes.
And then provide,
Mm-hmm.
make provision so that it doesn't happen.
Make provision so that it doesn't happen, or make provision that cushion it.
Precisely. Thank you. That will cushion it. Exactly. However, you should obsess over your desires. It says, for the joy that was set before him. Right? He obsessed and fixated on that. You should obsess on that, because that you are the fact that your consciousness visits that possibility is what activates it to become a reality for you. Right? It's a law. It's a law. So the story of the wise and foolish virgins.
Yes.
Think about it. The wise virgins were considered wise because they carried extra oil. How did they know that the bridegroom would delay? Or, right? They carried extra, they made provision just in case, they carried extra oil, right? And for that, they were called wise. So it is wisdom to consider certain possibilities. But they believed they were going to meet the bridegroom. So still obsess over your desires, and let that be where you so I can be aware of what can happen, but I'm not going to make that consistently what I am always fixated on. Because I know the power of consciousness. Consciousness activates. So if I don't want to activate what I don't want, then I should not obsess over it.
I want us to come out from spirituality, but I want to ask this question on this finally. How do you describe when someone truly believes a thing? How do you know when you truly believe a thing? And because they say when you believe something strongly, you have to come to manifestation. Because we are talking about trying to ensure that, okay, even if you are thinking the negative, the worst case scenario, the positive scenario should be there. How do you strongly believe a thing?
Okay, that's, again, like I say, your questions are quite interesting. So let me use this analogy. What's your name?
Benzik.
Benzik, okay. What species of living thing are you?
Human being.
You're a human being,
yes.
Right? Okay, so here's me telling you that you've been lied to. You're not a human being. That all that you've been told all this while is absolutely false. Do you want to know what you are?
What am I?
You're a periwinkle.
Well, that's impossible.
No, I'm telling you, that's what you are.
Well, I don't think I can accept that too.
You can't accept that. You cannot.
There's
no way in this world that you will accept that you're a periwinkle.
It's not possible for me to accept that.
It's not possible for you to accept it. Right? Now, beautiful. Did you see how you reacted? When I told you something contrary to what you believed, what did you do? You laughed. Right? Now, and you see, I've seen people tell me, Bankole, I believed. It did not happen. I prayed. I did. Hold on a second. Something contrary showed up. What was your reaction? I just gave you a contrary suggestion to something that you really believe, right? And you laughed, knowing of a certainty that there's absolutely no way in the world that you identify with something contrary. In the same vein, when we say we believe for something, life will happen. It will happen. A test will always come for the sake of the seed of the promise. When life happens, your automated response to something contrary shows up is proof of your belief.
Wow. So doesn't your response to that particular contrary opinion is proof whether you believe something or not?
Precisely.
People could actually respond in such a way, but does that change their belief? in a negative angle.
People could respond in what way?
Like if they say, maybe this thing may not be possible, and you say, oh, well, I'll try to make it possible. Does that mean you didn't believe?
You would so the person is saying they would try to make it possible. Try to make it possible. Try and pick your phone. It's a conviction. It's a knowing that, you see, which is why I said earlier on, there is nothing that you need or will ever need that has not been provided for. You just need to align with what has been provided for. And aligning is belief. Is belief. So I can say I believe for, a Rolls Royce, for instance. Those are my words. That's my mouth saying that. The real question is the status of your heart. And the measure of how aligned your heart is with what you are stating or professing with your mouth is how it reacts in the face of opposition, right? And this is the way I look at it. We speak to invest, and after we've invested, we speak to harvest.
Okay.
So people say certain things, and in their consistently saying it, their heart is gradually receiving what is being said. It is from a place of conviction in the heart that we then speak to activate the different forces in this world to create an opportunity for that reality to become manifested in our lives, right? But I see people who speak with their mouth, but their hearts are still far. And then they say, it's not working. It's not this, But the truth is, if we were to shine a spotlight or shine a torch in their hearts, we would see moments of doubts. We would see moments of disbelief here and there, right? I believe that belief is like a spectrum. At the end of that spectrum is full persuasion, right? And a number of times we're still on that journey, right? And then we're judging the results when we're still on the journey, right? So when we know that we are there, the way you responded would be our default response.
Now, do you believe in what will be?
No.
Because if you believe in destiny and saying that, and the scripture you read earlier said, before I formed you, I knew what you would do, what you will become. So does that mean what will be will be?
So am I a co-creator? If what will be, then why does it require my agreement? Why am I required?
Then why is it saying that you are predestined? I predestined you to do this or to become this even before you were born?
Because God exists in all existences. So, which is why I said that there are varying permutations. In maths, we did permutations and combinations. There are varying permutations. God, there is no space or place or time that he's not already in it. Because if he's not there, then it means that time, space, places exist outside of him. Eternity, God doesn't reside in eternity. Eternity resides in him. So there is no thought you will ever think, no situation you will ever be in, no assumption you will ever make that he is not already in. He exists in all spaces, all places, all possibilities. He exists in all existences, right? Now, for someone who exists in all existences, he knows everything. He knows there is no choice that you will make that he doesn't already have a provision, that he has not already made a provision for. And I know that this is sometimes our limited minds may not be able to grasp.
Mm.
But the reason why we can say he knew us before we were born, there's predestination, is that he exists in all existences. However, or in addition, there is the cooperation of man to be able to make a choice. And in making a choice, God has already made provision for whatever choice that I will make. So he's not in shock as to my decision to be able to determine what the outcome will be. Like I said, this are teeny weeny brains. Sometimes we find it difficult to assimilate. But the truth is, you say whatever will be. That means I can just go and be a fool. Abina, and whatever will be. We are co-creators.
Because that means if he said that means the scripture that says that are predestined to be a prophet. It's not absolutely correct then.
So aren't there instances of prophecies? There are prophecies that have been made that, so to speak,
because that scripture was speaking to Jeremiah and said, okay, I predestined that you're going to become a prophet even before you were born.
But Jeremiah had a choice.
He had a choice, but he didn't change what he was predestined.
But what I'm telling you is that in determining what will be, God resides in all existences, all possibilities, and all times, and he already knows.
The same God says, I give life and I take life. I can be able to determine who I give this or I didn't give this. Does that mean that it is God that determines who he casts into hell and who he doesn't cast into hell?
It also says that life and death is in the power of the tongue.
So why is it contradictory?
It's not. I don't think it's contradictory. I think that we are co-creators. God plays his role. We play our role. We come together to determine what reality is.
I am God. I make life and I also take life.
And life and death is in the power of the tongue.
He takes, he makes. So does it mean that he can choose to take your life whenever he wants?
I am not God.
That is what I'm saying. So it's a bit contradictory, because if you are saying that you are the one that determines my life, either you give me life or you take my life or you determine my success, so does that mean that you have to determine what happens to me at the end of the day, whatever I do?
God plays a role, I play a role, and that's the truth. There is the universal and divine consciousness that exists. It is universal, but it is also personal. So there's the universal consciousness that we all are, and we all are a part of. There is personal consciousness, there's personalized consciousness, where I play a role in my government, right? So it's like the law of gravity and the law of lift, right? The law of gravity says what goes up must come down. Yeah? But we all know that not everything that goes up comes down. Planes, right, have a law that supersedes the law of gravity, and that's the law of lift. It doesn't nullify it, but it just works in cooperation, hand in hand with it, to surpass the law of gravity. So both laws exist. I can't cancel one because of the existence of the other.
Let's come out from these deep waters. It's a bit deep. So I think let me round up these questions with Africa, Nigeria especially, and the challenges we face. Now, what do you think is our biggest problem and challenge, and what do you think is the solution for it?
Our mindset.
Our mindset.
I've always said that in Nigeria and in Africa, right? And I find that a lot of our leaders they don't really pay attention to that, right? And obviously, you know what they pay attention to by where the allocation of funds go to.
Yeah.
Right. It is clearly, I've observed, studied it, I've traveled to different parts of the world. It's the way we in Africa think. And until that changes, right? And until the leadership begins to prioritize. You see, repetition enhances retention. We've repeated cycles of difficulty. So we've been programmed to be accustomed to difficulty. And in making choices, I have found out that people will often choose familiar misery over foreign happiness. So because we've experienced cycles of difficulty, the average person will select, right, familiar difficulty over happiness that seems foreign to them. They will argue with you and say, no, we want this. But you will see these things happening a lot. You know, you go to the elections, what happens? It's a familiar party. And they will defend it and they will tell you it's just cycles of difficulty that we are accustomed to. Right? Cycles of difficulty we are accustomed to. A corrupt leader, right, goes back to his hometown and the streets are full and people are jubilating and celebrating. What does that tell you? Cycles of difficulty that we have had again and again that is now familiar and we are choosing. If we don't change the mentality of the people, we will keep selecting Egypt.
I think you should sum up this interview at this point in time. We have gone so very deep already. So in rounding up, what do you think are your final words and what your last statement that you can use to round up and encourage people?
Well, we've spoken about so many things, you know, and I think that I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think my final words would be to just help people realize that there is more to reality than meets the eye. We've talked a lot around things that are not pedestrian, right? And I think that the average person should be curious enough to inquire as to what truth is. The average person out there should be a seeker of truth. Don't be caught up in what has been handed down. You know, ask your questions. Go on a quest. Go on a journey to find answers. And in going on this journey, you know, there's wisdom that is lurking around, you know, for you. And that wisdom can truly, truly transform your life. I think those will be my final words.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Guys, thank my very credible guest here, Bankole Williams, for this very powerful session.
You are welcome.
Really appreciate you. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. So guys, thank my guest Bankole Williams for this very inspiring and very mind transforming session. So I believe you've been highly, highly impacted. So like I said, if you like this, share it and also subscribe to the channel if you're yet to subscribe. So I don't know if you'd like to share how people can reach out to you, contact you, and everything.
Well, I'm pretty active on Instagram. My handle is @IamBankole. If you'd like to reach out to me, send an email to info@bankolewilliams.com. Yeah, so you can reach out to me that way.
So that's it, guys. You've heard from him. I remember your host, Benzik. I think this is our first interview for the year 2025. So I appreciate you so far, all the years that you've supported this channel and all your support so far. I appreciate all of you for your likes, your shares, your comments. I read every one of it. So this is a great new year, and we believe that this year we're going to do much more. We're going to just anticipate a whole lot of content that's going to transform you, change your mindset, and also shape your life and help you achieve success in your own sphere of influence. So I remain your host, Benzik, and I'm going to see you again next time. Cheers.